Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and I am super excited to have Jeff Jaime with me today. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We've known each other almost 10 years now.
That's right.
And got to do some fun stuff together over the years. You own 5 businesses between you and your wife.
Yes.
Which that's probably another episode and maybe even a counseling session. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I need it.
Military background. I'll let you unpack some of this. In the process of releasing a book. So about the time this airs, it'll be hitting the market. So super excited about that. Maybe we can talk toward the end for a couple minutes about what the book is. But you're a leadership guru. You spend a lot of time reading on leadership. I think your dissertation, you'll be wrapping up soon.
Yes.
And that'll have a leadership component to it. And so super excited for that, for you being Dr. Jeff Jaime. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
That'll be very cool. I'll get to say I know him before he was a doctor. So
right.
that'll be fun. But anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell the audience a little bit about who Jeff is and what turns Jeff on and gets you out of bed every day.
Great. Well, again, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to the conversation. I always enjoy talking to you, even without microphones. So I appreciate the opportunity. So as you said, I was in the military for 22 years. I was very fortunate to spend my first 12 years as an enlisted member, which I always say was the best training of my life to become an officer, a commissioned officer after the 12 years. I was able to do that, and I became what's now called a cyber operations officer. Cyber has a lot of buzz in the world today, so a really saturated term. But it is that, and that's the field that I stayed in. You mentioned my wife. We've been married now 21 years together. We have 3 children, mine, hers, and ours. And we have 9 dogs. And that plus the businesses, I'm never bored. I can tell you that for sure. I'm never bored. I'm always having to do something or just wanting to do something. I'm always active in thinking and doing, and so that kind of wraps up all my busy life. And just having the time to find peace is it's a jewel. When I can sit down, and I spend that time early in the morning, 5:30. I'll be doing my Bible reading and just try to be in God's presence. And just have that time to plan. Before I know it's 8:00. And I'm like, whoa, I gotta jump in the shower and get going. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that and just all the blessings that we've been able to receive as a family.
Yeah. The one of the things that I've admired you since I first met you was you've created a really unique culture in your business. And that was very intentional on your part. Talk to us a little bit about what drove you to, hey, I gotta lead people differently. What was that first catalyst that got you to even thinking that direction? And then kind of where's that gone? You've developed a cool culture, and I'm trying not to give it away. And to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am super grateful that early on in our business, we've been now almost 17 years with our business doing government contracting and mostly in defense contracting. But I drew my inspiration from several books. Of course, one of my Clifton strengths is input, where I can't get enough in. I'm constantly reading and just soaking everything in. One of the side effects of that is I don't throw anything away. So that's another topic, another story. My wife would be testifying to that I don't get rid of stuff, which is kind of a problem. But for me, I don't want to get rid of it. I want to keep bringing in, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the key things I read early on was Tony Hsieh's book, Delivering Happiness. Tony Hsieh was the CEO of Zappos. Unfortunately, he had an untimely death. He was burned. I don't know if you knew that, but he inspired me in the way of developing a culture in a business. And it's not just a culture of, hey, let's have a party and, let's do prizes and that kind of thing, which is nice. But to me, things go deeper than that. And fundamentally, I drew my inspiration from from my grandfather.
Mm.
My grandfather, who we always looked up to, set examples for us on how to treat people. And he did that by serving those that were his neighbors. And so I remember vividly that as a little kid, I was watching him. He was in the living room talking to this neighbor of his, and she was crying. And they were talking Spanish, and I knew something was going on, but I didn't really know what. And so my grandmother came and tapped me, and I was like, well, what's Papo doing? And she's like, they're about to turn off her utilities. And San Antonio sometimes gets cold. Today is one of those days where it was 9 degrees outside. It felt like 9 degrees near my house. But it was a cold time, and she was concerned they were going to turn off her power. She didn't have the money. Mm. So I saw my grandfather stand up, reach in his wallet, and he gave her money to pay her utilities so they wouldn't turn off her utility. Now, he wasn't a wealthy person, but he was a giving person. And that model is something that I believe that leaders should model in their companies. The more you serve and the more you give, I think is the real way we develop culture. And so we got lucky to be able to do that and shape that in our company. We even have something called the Culture Club, which is not the group, and a lot of people don't get the reference, but the Culture Club is a group of people who are inspired to develop and keep going a culture. Because I don't think of everything. I mean, I'm just grateful to have set the framework. But if it wasn't for those around me daily or weekly, none of this would have happened. It's really their inspiration and ideas that I get to be a participant. Mm-hmm. And I think it's great because I think that's a very big difference in the way I think leadership should be and the way traditional leadership is.
Yeah. Well, as an owner, I think the big thing is you've also enabled and empowered them to build culture.
Yes.
Right. So a lot of times we either purposefully as leaders or accidentally as leaders squash that.
Right.
And you've consciously said, I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to intentionally enable them to build a good culture.
Right. You know, when we look into like what constitutes success and what matters most. Traditionally, you have like spreadsheets and balance sheets and profit margins and those indicators that are external factors of achievement, which are, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think as we only focus on that, we're losing a big part of what leadership means. And so just the other day, I saw the Gallup Institution publish their 2024 annual workplace report. And it's 150 plus pages of research they did around the world and figured out, what's going good, what's not going so great. And they found that disengagement across the planet is costing $8.9 trillion a year because there's only about 33% of workforce engaged at work.
Wow.
So there's a huge problem. It's an epidemic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we all have to step up if we're going to put a dent in those numbers. And one way to do it, obviously the traditional measures of success aren't working. Mm-hmm. What's the answer? I think non-traditional methods, the holistic approach is what gets you through the day. And what that means is where you're focusing on servant leadership, and giving to those that are closest to you. When you do that, then it starts to turn the tide.
Mm-hmm.
And the research does show when you do that, you end up getting the numbers that the world thinks is important.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a flip. But so if you want these, I once gave a talk about where B is greater than A.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
The B being the holistic approach does get you the A's that you're looking for, that you see in the newspapers and the magazines.
Mm-hmm.
But if you only focus on that, you will never get the enduring cultural development that's worth having around and lasting.
I suspect your definition of success may not be extremely unique, but it's probably more rare. Because to your point earlier, what are the profit margins? What's the sales volume? What's our efficiencies? There's classic measurements
Yes.
that would be part of classic definitions of success.
Yes.
What's your definition of success?
So I tend to believe that the definitions found in the holistic pieces, like, are you making meaningful differences in people's lives? Is your team, are they a cohesive team? Are you making a difference? Are you helping them become better versions of themselves? Like, the multiplying factor of your influence to the team is really how you measure success. What difference in their lives are you making? And what are you allowing them to realize why they're here? I feel like we've taken an oath as a business leader, business owner. We swore an oath that we would do whatever it took to put our people in positions where they can find out where significance means to them in their life. I think that's what the oath says. And if you're not ready to do that, well, maybe you shouldn't be in a leadership job, because that is what leadership means to me. That's what success means to me. Yeah, you need the numbers, you need those, because as we say in other circles, like no margin, no mission, right? You have to have a means to provide. But if your heart is only there, you're missing out.
So if that's your definition for success, no margin, no mission, there's also the old saying, if you can't measure it, how would you measure success in those softer things?
Great. So there are surveys you can do. You can check your team cohesion, see how engaged. We just talked about the Gallup problem, or the Gallup reported problem. Disengagement. How they're actively engaged. You get to know people, right? You walk around and you talk to people and you kind of get what's on their heart. And you can tell based on the conversations, once you've earned, by the way, you have to earn this respectful right to hear and see what's in their heart. When you can tell that they are actively engaged, enthusiasm, it's hard to fake that, right? When you get to know somebody, you can tell if they're just, parroting back something they think you want to hear, or do they really mean it? And so there's tools that are kind of cool to measure things. Nothing's perfect, but if you can take indicators from different tools, surveys. We used to use Tiny Pulse as an example, which measures the happiness index of your team. Way back when it first came out in 2010, we started using that. And so you get a little indicators that way. You can tell by the morale. And by the way, here's a big one. You don't have any turnover. So selective, volunteer turnover is really what you're fighting. And that's a big problem in the world. Turnover costs huge for companies, and it's an epidemic. And so we need other business owners and leaders to join this fight against disengagement. And when you start seeing these numbers turn, that's a good measure.
So disengagement being one, happiness, if you can find some sort of measurement for that, using some sort of survey or Tiny Pulse concept. What about volunteerism.
Yeah. So now you're scratching a little bit into the book, because here's kind of how I say it. If you can trigger transient emotional resonance into something long term, you're basically taking these moments of feeling of goodness, right? Which happens when you volunteer, when you help somebody else, when you do things for others. The brain frequency, the mesolimbic pathway of your brain just lights up with dopamine, oxytocin, these chemicals that God put in our bodies to ignite when certain things happen, right? So as a leader, you want to make those things trigger. And one way to do it is to volunteer and help, right? Mm-hmm. And so it helps with so many things, depression, disconnectedness. As another thing in that report, there's an extreme amount of people who feel lonely at work. And so if we can get people out and about and help volunteer and doing good for others, then you've triggered these biological impulses that happen naturally. And then when you keep doing that, it forms a glue, a team bond where they don't want to leave each other. You know, I shared before we were talking about when I was deployed in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, going through those life experiences together. Oh, here's one. I was at the Pentagon during the September 11th attack. My boss was killed in the airplane. And the people I was with, every September 11th, we connect, even if it's the only time of year that we connect. Wow. Because we experience something so different together. We never forget each other. When you do that in a business, not that you want to be attacked, I'm saying sure. when you influence the lives of somebody else together, you don't want to leave each other. And so that to me is kind of the magic to it. God made us to feel great when we do great. It's just in our bio.
Interesting. I'm looking back as you're talking at my own career, and it was when I was in corporate life, I'm still friends with some of the people that I was working with in my 20s, and we were doing our jobs, but we were also getting to do new, cool, cutting-edge experiment, try things, brainstorm, come up with new processes, new procedures, new layouts, new designs, tweak the old designs, like just it was a time of innovation was encouraged. And so there was people that I would innovate with. And so, I was doing my job, technically, what I was hired to do, but I was doing more than.
Yes.
And I have very fond memories of those seasons, right?
Yeah.
And even in you triggering those memories, I feel my energy go up.
If we were both under fMRI machines right now, you would see that visually. It would show up. And that's the thing. Like if we could, intentionally seek out moments to do that for people that are in our care, then we're triggering that. And I think that's a responsibility of leadership, is to put people inside those moments so they can experience that. It's one thing to read about somebody else's experience and another to live it yourself. And when you as a leader have the ability to frame the next time that might happen, whether it's doing a give back event or just helping each other, then you're helping people feel that natural, reaction in your body. And then they attribute it to a time that they're there. And the more you do that, the stronger that bond becomes. And so that's kind of it. It's very simple.
The genius things usually are simple.
Yeah, it's just, and I don't make any of this stuff up. We just copy it. We just copy what I've seen work. And you can see it over time. I never knew the science behind it or anything. I just see reactions and comments people would make after we would go do stuff to help others. And I listened to them. And then later on, when I started working on my research, I started seeing the scholarly terms that matched what I was witnessing. I'm like, wow, what great, we were onto something. I just didn't know what it was called.
For, not to put you on the spot, but for our audience, give us some examples of some of the stuff. I mean, I could name a few because you've shared them with me over the years, but give us some examples like the going to HEB with cash or some of those kinds of things that y'all have done.
I'll tell you that quick. I'll try to be quick about it, but it's a story where, it was a week before Christmas one year, and we said, hey, let's pick out what we think might be one of the lowest income areas of our city, what HEB is in. And we looked at a map and we found one and we went to it. So we got in one vehicle after we all parked in the parking lot, and I handed out money to people so they could bless somebody.
And this was company money. You took it out of your company profits.
Company profits to give to our team members to go bless somebody. And one of the questions was, well, how do we know who to do that? I'm like, I'll just let God tell you who. Just to see how it goes. Not
everybody on your team follows God or claims to be spiritual, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So we okay, let's do that. So I gave them a few $100 each. We go inside the store and I spot this one lady with 4 kids, and her shopping cart was heaping full. And I thought to myself, that's going to be my assigned person, right? So I started following them around, trying not to be so obvious that I was stalking her.
You don't want security escorting you.
Right. So I'm trying to keep distance, but I don't want to miss the moment. And the moment was when she was checking out. So she pulls up to register number 5, and I made myself way to the end cap of register 6, and I'm side-eyeing her to see when everything's finally on the belt. So then, as the last item gets on the belt, I go in front of her and I tell the cashier, I gave her $400, and I said, I want to pay for her groceries. And the cashier was like, whoa, what's this? And so I repeated it. So now she got excited. The cashier got excited. And she was like, oh, okay, great. And so now she's, getting illuminated, and people start looking over and they realize there's something different going on right here. The kids are looking at me. They're 4 little girls are looking at me like, whoa, who's this weirdo guy? And the lady's not knowing what's going on. Finally, I told the cashier, I said, pay for her groceries. Whatever change is left, give it to her. So she's now part of it. She gives her the chain. The lady starts crying. I was very grateful. My brother snapped a photo of this moment because I still look at it occasionally to remind me of the power of what happened. So she hugs me. They start to leave. I turn around, and the manager of HEB, that store, comes up to me. He goes, hey, I saw what you did for that lady. How did you know? I said, how did I know what? It's about that lady. So what do you mean? Those all weren't her kids. 2 of those kids' parents got killed in a car wreck 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And she was just here asking if we could get a payment plan set up for her because she wasn't thinking she was going to have to raise these kids. Talk about chills. I thought, did God just use me in this?
Mm.
And I later reflected on it, and I said, it's amazing what will happen if you let God take the wheel over your heart and just steer you where you need to go, because that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of in a daze. Here I thought I was going to surprise this lady. God had another plan to
surprise you.
Yeah, and it was a very shocking thing to learn that was the lady who was my target, and I thought I was stalking her, and God was probably laughing about it, right? So that really happened.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
so that's fortunately we have lived so many stories. That's just one of them. But I'm grateful to have a team with huge hearts because they want to do that type of thing. They want their life to mean something more than getting, transactions done.
Yeah. I know y'all have done other things like Angel Tree for a lot of years.
Yeah, that was a huge...
For those that don't know what that program is, basically people are incarcerated and they can't buy gifts for their kids, so they send you the list. You buy gifts for the kids and deliver them from the parent that's incarcerated.
Yeah.
And your team gets behind that, shops for the gifts, wraps the gifts, delivers the gifts.
Yeah. Chuck Colson, who was Richard Nixon's lawyer, because of the Watergate scandal, he was put to prison. And while he was in prison, he got to talk to prisoners that were his fellow inmates and learned they were missing. They didn't have God in their life. So he started trying to put that in their life, and he started up these different things, and one of them was this prison fellowship program that you're talking about. And so what's really fascinating about that process is we had come to a point where community members wanted to help us. Like, one part of it is after you go buy all these gifts, by the way, we broke Walmart's cash register 2 times, having a whole line of people with a bunch of baskets of gifts. And so I learned the cutoff. Like, there's this point where you cut off and have pay, otherwise you're going to have to redo it. But anyway, we start celebrating the checkout time. And then from there it goes to the office, and now the real hard work begins. I say hard because I'm not good at gift wrapping. But fortunately, we have a community of folks, friends of ours, that have enjoyed their participation. They'll come and help wrap the gifts. And we just make sure we have food and, pizza or soda, whatever, to kind of serve them while they're helping serve us and the community. And after that, there was a guy who later on became an annual thing for him. He would donate his bus to drive us around the city, because once we load up all these gifts, we would drive around to each of the homes and deliver them, usually to grandma, because the standard case was grandma was now taking care of the kids. Her son is the one in prison. The mother's, they don't know what happened to her. That's kind of a typical case. But the beauty of then praying with grandma and having our team witness stuff that you have to live to feel what I'm saying was very powerful. It became an annual thing. So anyone could do this, right? So that's the nice thing is we're not doing anything that you have to have a certain certification to do or a degree to do. Like, you just have the heart and willingness to want to. And then take the time, intentional time, to invest in the lives of your people by putting them in these situations that causes this emotional resonance to take place, and let God take it from there, because that's really all that it is.
Let's say somebody's tuned into this podcast and they go, man, what Jeff's saying's really tugging at me. How do they get started? Like, what do they go Google team building idea? I mean, like, where could they go get some ideas of the HEB thing I've never heard of before? That was just an idea that came to you. But like, there's Habitat for Humanity. Your team can go out on a Saturday and help build a home. There's other things that you guys have done over the years, but like, is there a published list of ideas somewhere? Or?
There are. I mean, unfortunately, there's a long list of needs, right? I always say you can close your eyes, reach in your hand of a bucket, and come out with tons of needs, right? You can't do everything, which is wish you can, but you can't. There's just not practical to try and do everything. However, if a leader wants to change the way they're leading in this more profound way, my first thing would be sit down with your team and say it. Hey, my heart has been tugging towards this. I really want to put you in positions where you feel like the significance of your life is much bigger than you doing this by yourself. And I want to help that happen. And if you're really blessed, you will have some others in the group that want to do it, and they'll come up with ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so you then just be a nurturer and say, okay, here's if you have a budget or if you have an increment of time that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Not every organization can just take off
Mm-hmm.
and all at once. But if you have a way to invoke these ideas, if it's worth doing, it takes time to plan out,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are tons of lists. There's tons of, community needs out there. Or you can dig into the hearts of your people and they'll tell you, here's one thing I did find. And the research then backs this up. If you have a team member, which we refer to our employees as team members, who has something near and dear to them, and you're going to pick something anyway, pick something that's near and dear to them. Here's an example. If you have a team member who has a child that has special needs, and then you all rally around a special needs event, how does that make that person feel?
Mm-hmm.
My company is invested in my heart. Like, I live with this every single day, and they're showing me, they see me, they hear me, and they love me,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pouring into helping me realize something that's directly impacting my child.
Mm-hmm.
And so that crank turns way up
Mm-hmm.
when you measure connection to the company.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not asking for people to hire people that have problems, because we all have problems. But if they happen to be there, if you happen to have an interest area or something that's close to you, and you can contribute something towards that, that's even higher level than picking an HEB or something like that.
Yeah, there's a business owner you and I both know, and you may remember the story from years ago. There was a person in the company, their child was molested by a family member.
Mm.
And most of the people in the company had similar experiences, either directly or a family member that had, or a best friend that had.
Yeah.
And poof, all of a sudden that company had a mission.
Yeah.
It was we take our profits to help reduce this kind of thing in our community.
Yeah.
And that became, the whole company was like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is what we can get behind, because we all feel it. And the few people that hadn't saw their friends and coworkers, team members feeling it.
Yes.
And they're like, well, if it's important to them, it's important to me.
Yeah. And that type of thing is what we can all believe. If there was a full-on army of interest in that for all these companies, that turns that Gallup poll around. It turns that report into something more lasting, because traditional success with the bottom line numbers, we're seeing the results now. It's not working. And so we need to dig into a power that we all have that's holistic, more serving than just being served, right? Traditional leadership, the misconception is, I'm in charge, here's what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to know all the answers, I'm telling you what to do. In my view, if you picture a traditional org chart where there's a box up here and then spreads down, you flip that upside down, and now I am at the very bottom of that chart. I'm serving upward
Mm-hmm.
to those who are above me, which is my direct leadership team. And they're serving the workforce, and they ultimately serve the customers. And great if we can all serve the community too, because that's where these triggers happen. And so it's really a change and shift in mindset. Do I want to be a servant, or do I want to be served?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I vote the first way every time.
Patrick Lencioni's, one of his more recent books, I heard him talking about it at the Global Leadership Summit, and he's saying his hope was that one day there is no more term servant leadership. Mm-hmm. Leadership is service.
That's right.
And nobody would consider you a leader if you weren't a servant.
That's right. So it's just part of, we've talked before about AI, like it's going to just be part of life anymore. You don't have to deliberately go to do something to use AI. It's just part of our life. But yeah, I'm grateful for that, because here's the thing. In the past, and I was always grateful that we were approached by a little newspaper company or somebody that wanted to do a story on something that was different, like these HEB stories or other stories. Like, we have a ton of stories, and they wrote it as news. And so, like I said, I was grateful that someone was taking the thoughtful time to document. But it's kind of depressing if you think about that that's news, right? Which means it's not very common. And I wanted to flip that too and say, wouldn't it be great if that was just normal?
Mm-hmm.
Like, my work cares for me and cares enough about me, they're going to spend intentional time in trying to help me become the best version of me,
Mm-hmm.
and help me realize things in my life I might not even know is possible. And so if we can do that as intentional leaders and serve them, then it's no longer news.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how we turn the tide of typical.
You mentioned the word time just then. How much, if you look at the year, how much time do you give the typical employee to do these things, whatever these things are?
Yep. So we had a couple of structures in our company. One is we have 5 core values: family first, dream big, achieve forward, have fun, achieve forward, and give back. And the give back moment, so each of those we would spend 1 calendar day a month focused on those 5 things. So give back events was once a month. For the day, we would focus on one thing. But we also encourage people to engage in community service at least 4 hours a week. You can't make people want to do that, but if they did, we would pay them to engage in community service. What we found out over time is others would hear about this and say, hey, how do we do that? I've had people say, hey, Jeff, my kids are they don't appreciate the stuff they have. They need to see that they have it, they're lucky. Mm-hmm. Can you have them be part of one of your community service things, and so they can see? And you're smiling because
love it.
I'm not their parent,
right?
But I'm grateful for them believing that what we're doing will help.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people call me back and say, hey, you said, and I didn't make this up, I read it, one of the things to cure depression is to get involved in community service. Stephen Post's book, The Hidden Gifts of Helping, talks about this. And so one of my friends called me a year or so later, maybe a couple of years later, and said, hey, that thing you told my son, if he's ever feeling depressed, go do community service. He was feeling very lonely in college, and he remembered what you said, and he went and he volunteered in the community, and he came back and he called me and said, it worked. And so I don't get credit for that because God built that into us, right? Mm-hmm. But the fact that he took that nugget and went with it, now who knows how many stories he's able to tell other people to do the same thing.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So
one of the, what are some of the misconceptions about leadership? We've talked a lot here about service. We've talked about the traditional ways aren't working. Where do you think the breakdown is? Where's the misconception?
Well, the world celebrates what I call the external factors of achievement, right? So the misconception is you're supposed to do those things by the book or to the T. And we get caught up in these traditional methods of determining what success means. And so I think that's a misconception is it's about authority and power and directing and being the one who should be served. You know, I'm glad to be around other business owners who don't completely do that, but I've seen this. And whenever I talk to team members, their team members, about stuff we do, they say, well, that's different. I've never heard of that. But I think that's a problem. Is the misconception is you're supposed to direct people what to do and tell them, like that was back in the early 1900s, by the way. You know, the time and motion studies and, hey, do this, do that. Don't ask any questions. Just be the robot and complete your task and you'll be good. And what was missing from that was the human spirit. Right? It didn't take long before work, these movements of trying to come up with humanitarian ways of treating people, because we can't trick what God made us, right? We can't trick that. Trying to make people conform to a very strict, rigid, robotic type behavior, that's the problem. So I think a misconception would be, if I don't do that, we're not going to get the results. When, ironically, if you do the serving and giving, you'll not only build a strong, cohesive team, but you'll end up getting the results. We've been blessed. We've had Inc. 5000 4 times. We had Inc. 500 one time. We had Best Place to Work 12 years in a row. We've had this and that of the year and all these external factors of achievement. But our mission was to go here and serve and give. Those are results of, not reasons for.
Right. You know, you're talking about misconceptions, and there's this misconception, I think, that everything Jeff's saying is good. Like I can mentally ascend to what Jeff's saying, but I got a business to run, and it takes time to do those foo-foo things. And that's why I asked you the time question a few minutes ago, is you encourage, not everybody takes you up on it, but you encourage 4 hours a week of community involvement. So about 10% of a typical paid week. I would guess that your employee involvement is way, 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 way higher than the global average that Gallup just came up with.
Yeah.
Right. So if Gallup's saying globally is 35% engaged, right? 33% engaged. I mean, 66% is not.
Yeah.
So you're only getting 40% efficiency out of your people. If you're saying, hey, look, I'll sow 10% into the community and what my people are passionate about, what tugs on their heart. And in turn, I suspect they probably are more excited about the day-to-day operations, right?
Yeah.
And so you're saying I could either have a workforce that 40% of them want to be here and are productive, or I can have a workforce that everybody wants to be here, but I got to give up 10%. I got to give 10% back to the community.
Yeah, and I'll re-underline this. You know, we're not perfect by any stretch.
Sure.
We're not trying to be. But Gallup's report didn't mention anything that we just talked about. Why? Because the standard measures of success are not what the world focuses on, and we see the results, right? So if you can intuit that the reason why they're not good is because we don't focus on them, right? We don't focus on these holistic measures of leadership success.
What if it's the handful of companies like yours that's even why it's 33% engaged?
Now, I would like to say that. I mean, you know, we've had, to be total transparent, we've had fluctuations in staffing because our work is based on government contracts. And so whenever those expire or they combine contracts with other contracts, we no longer have the work to be able to have the folks who were doing it. But I've had many who say, hey, is there another place I can go in your company? Because it's different, and I'm grateful to be here.
You've had people come back, too, when the work returns.
We've had people come back, and, the little anecdote I'll share there is the grass can look green somewhere until you actually go there and figure out it's just painted. Painted grass is not really green grass. And so, again, we're not perfect, but it's different. And I attribute that completely to the hearts of the people that I've been fortunate to be around, because they're the ones who make this all work. Spirit-led, just, really wanting to be not different to be different, but just to be better, like better human beings. Yeah. And I think that's what we should be cultivating.
A friend of mine says, do the right things for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So just before we wrap up the show, I want to get your final thoughts on this, what we've been talking about the last bit, and then I want to talk about the book for a few minutes.
Okay.
So any final thoughts, though, on what we've covered so far, or put a bow around it?
I would think so. Leaders should listen to what their heart is saying, and I'm hopeful that what it's saying is they want to multiply value in others, right? Not just add value, multiply it. And so John Maxwell talks a lot about adding and multiplying value. So if you want to be like, here's one way of saying it. How do you want to outlive your life? How will what you do now live well past you? My grandfather's still alive, not physically, but his lessons of leadership and giving and serving are still alive.
They motivated you. Now you've motivated this kid that went to college.
Correct.
This kid goes to college. He serves the community.
Right. So how you choose to outlive your life is a very intentional, response to that. And so I would like leaders to say, I really care about what legacy or, what will be enduring, so that my life starts when I'm no longer here. Like my life begins when I'm gone.
That's good.
That's how I would say it.
Very good. Jeff, tell us about your new book. You got the word glow in it.
Yes. So we've been talking around it. So it's called From Glow to Glue, Inspired Leadership Strategies That Stick.
Okay.
And so this glow we've talked about here is it's the transient emotional resonance that happens when you do something. You mentioned earlier, I feel it now reflecting back on the time I had with my colleagues at work. So that glow actually is measurable. You can see it in fMRI. You can feel it when you do good, when you serve others. If you ever go down the road and you see a homeless person, you just feel led to give them something, give them a food item or help somebody or pay it forward. I've done that too. I'm sure you have, where you just say, you know what? I'm paying for their coffee behind me, whatever their bill is, just pay it. And so you're hopefully inspiring. When you drive away, there's a glow feeling you have. They call it the giver's glow, that happened because the chemistry took place. Now, that's fleeting. That's a very ephemeral time period where that happens. So then it goes away. Like, you don't stay that way the whole day. It's just a very small amount of time. But what I've learned is if you can do that in groups, then you create group glow. And over time, if you do it frequent enough with consistency, the group glow turns into group glue. And they don't want to leave each other. And so that's what the book is advocating, is how to change the pattern of standard traditional success into something more holistic and enduring by it's doing a trifecta of emotional intelligence, servant leadership, and neuro leadership. Those three aspects make up the concept of the book. And I use a lot of stories on how we've done that here. We've lived through that HB story is actually in our intro to the book. But There's many of them. I'm grateful for them. But the book actually will be released and published in the summer.
Okay.
My team of the structured approach I'm following, they have us marketing. And by the end of this week, we'll have this pre-sale campaign where people can buy tickets to an event.
Wow.
And you get a free book as a participant. So there's a whole thoughtful way they go about that. I'm just really grateful to have stumbled across them, because before I tried doing this on my own, it just wasn't working out.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. I look forward to the book. It's going to be available where when it does come out?
It'll be on Amazon.
Okay.
And it'll be Amazon and Audible.
Okay.
Once
nice.
And
are you the reader of the Audible book? Is it your voice?
I haven't even thought of that, but I don't think I would do a good enough job, to be honest. I think somebody else should do it.
We gotta start interviewing folks for like Jeff's voice,
or their own. But we have that what's it called, the imposter syndrome. Where like I shouldn't be, like, who am I to do that?
Read the book. Yeah.
So, but anyway,
my vote is that you read your own book. I really enjoy it when the authors read.
Okay. I'll take that into.
But thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. And
well, this was awesome.
Blessing the audience with what you've experienced and learned. And
I appreciate you and this whole process that you're doing. You're touching people, and it's making a difference.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And you, thanks for sharing the glow today.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel motivated. I want to go do something more.
I do too. Thanks, buddy.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate
you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.